Before we dive into today's story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. You won't want to miss the ending of this one. My name is Jessica Lane. I'm 32, and for most of my life, I existed in the quiet, manicured lanes of suburban New Jersey, living a life so unremarkable it was almost a caricature. I was the good daughter, a title I had earned through 3 decades of diligent, uncomplaining service. It was my defining characteristic, the role I was born to play, the label that hung around my neck like a medal and a millstone. I was the one who remembered everyone's birthday, complete with a thoughtfully chosen card and a gift that screamed, "I listen." I was the one who organized the family holidays, creating detailed spreadsheets for Thanksgiving potlucks and color-coded calendars for Christmas gift exchanges, ensuring every cousin's dietary restriction was accounted for and every ancient feud was carefully navigated. I was the family's designated diplomat, the one who mediated the petty, perennial squabbles that erupted over reheated political talking points or grudges so old no one remembered their origin. I was the peacemaker, the planner, the steady, reliable bedrock of our family. The role was a heavy cloak, woven from duty and expectation. I had worn it for so long, I wasn't sure who I was underneath it all. I wasn't sure there was anything left. My mother, Linda, was the sun around which our small community revolved. To the outside world, she was a paragon of maternal virtue, a walking, talking embodiment of the suburban dream. As the long-serving PTA president, she was a familiar, smiling face at every school fundraiser and bake sale, her presence as reliable as the morning bell. She moved through the world with an aura of unimpeachable goodness, her contributions to the community a constant topic of conversation. I remember once, in high school, a local paper did a feature on her, calling her the heart of the community. She had it framed and hung it in the most prominent spot in our living room, a constant, silent testament to her perceived perfection. She was a dedicated church volunteer, her Sundays a blur of charity drives and potluck preparations. Her lemon meringue pies were legendary, their arrival at a neighbor's doorstep a sign of comfort and care. Her generosity was a shield, deflecting any potential criticism. She projected an image of the ideal all-American mom, an image so flawless, so meticulously crafted, that to question it would have been sacrilege. It would have been like questioning the sky itself. Then there was Michael, my husband. When we first met, his charm was a force of nature, an intoxicating whirlwind of grand gestures and whispered promises that swept me off my feet and convinced me that fairy tales were real. He saw me, he said, not just the responsible daughter, but the woman underneath. He made me feel seen in a way I never had before. But 3 years into our marriage, the whirlwind had died down, leaving a stark and unnerving stillness in its wake. The grand gestures had become mumbled apologies for working late. The whispered promises had faded into silence, replaced by the glow of his phone screen as he scrolled endlessly through social media, a digital wall between us. A distance had settled between us, a cool and silent space that ached with unspoken words and unanswered questions. Our 3rd wedding anniversary was on the horizon, a milestone I had seized upon with a desperate kind of optimism. I was determined to celebrate it with the kind of fanfare that might just bridge that growing chasm, that might remind us both of the vibrant, all-consuming love we once shared. I had thrown myself into planning a lavish party, a $5,000 celebration that, if I was being honest with myself, felt less like a testament to our marriage and more like a last-ditch, panicked effort to save it. The first discordant note in the carefully composed symphony of my life came, as it so often does in this digital age, with the buzz of a text message. I was in the kitchen, wrist-deep in flour, trying to perfect a new cupcake recipe for the party, when my phone lit up on the counter. It was from my mother. The message was short, but its implications were vast and unsettling. It was clearly not meant for me. The words were flirty, intimate, laced with an inside joke I didn't understand and a familiarity that was jarringly out of place for a mother-daughter exchange. "Can't wait to have you all to myself again. Last night was just a preview." I stared at the screen, the words blurring as a cold knot tightened in the pit of my stomach. My first instinct was to rationalize, to build a wall of denial against the creeping dread. It was a mistake. She must have sent it to the wrong person. A misplaced joke meant for my father, perhaps. But my father was a man of simple, predictable humor. This was something else entirely. This was charged, clandestine. The seed of doubt had been planted, a tiny, poisonous seed in the fertile ground of my growing unease. I tried to dismiss it, to force it from my mind, but it lingered, a bitter aftertaste to my mother's sweet, public persona. The next morning, the sun streamed into our kitchen, casting a deceptively cheerful glow on what felt like the set of a play. My mother was there, a whirlwind of bright, bubbly energy, humming a cheerful tune as she pulled a pan of cinnamon rolls from the oven. The smell, which usually filled me with a sense of warmth and nostalgia, now seemed cloying, artificial. She pulled me into a hug, her embrace feeling a fraction too tight, her movements a little too performative. She pressed a crisp, folded $100 bill into my hand. "Go on, treat yourself to something nice for the party," she said, her smile a carefully constructed mask of maternal affection. "A new dress, maybe? You deserve it, you work so hard." But as I looked into her eyes, I saw past the practiced warmth. I saw a flicker of something else, something cold and calculating. It was a look I recognized, a look that always preceded a carefully orchestrated act of manipulation, a subtle power play designed to put me in my place. The cracks in her perfect maternal facade were beginning to show, but I pushed the thought away, scolding myself for my paranoia. I was just stressed, I told myself, overwhelmed with party planning and a touch of pre-anniversary jitters. I was letting my imagination run away with me. I had to be. The human mind has a remarkable, terrifying capacity for denial. It's a powerful defense mechanism, a self-preservation instinct that shields us from truths too painful to bear, from realities that would shatter our world into a million irreparable pieces. For days, I existed in this self-imposed fog, clinging to the familiar comfort of routine as if it were a life raft in a churning sea. I focused on the party, on the seating charts and floral arrangements, ignoring the mounting evidence that my world was tilting precariously on its axis. I was a master of suppression, a skill honed over a lifetime of being the good daughter. But the truth, as they say, has a way of coming out. It doesn't knock politely at the door. It kicks the door down, and when it finally burst into my life, it was not a gentle revelation, but a brutal, soul-shattering cataclysm. It happened late one night, the house shrouded in the kind of profound stillness that amplifies every creak of the floorboards, every beat of your own terrified heart. Sleep was a distant country I couldn't reach, my mind a relentless carousel of anxieties. I found myself in the living room, drawn there by a force I didn't understand. The pale, bluish light of Michael's iPad, left on the coffee table, cast an eerie glow in the darkness. He was asleep on the couch, a frequent occurrence lately, a physical manifestation of the emotional Grand Canyon that had opened up between us. He looked peaceful, almost boyish in his sleep, and a wave of guilt washed over me. On a whim, a desperate, gut-wrenching impulse fueled by a week of simmering suspicion, I picked up the device. It was unlocked. It was synced to our home network, a shared digital space that I had always believed was ours alone. It was a digital window, and I was about to look through it into the abyss. The messages were there. Not just one or two, but a torrent of them, a secret history of betrayal written in glowing, venomous text. I scrolled back, weeks, then months, my breath catching in my throat. It was all there, a detailed chronicle of their affair, from flirtatious beginnings to explicit plans. And then I saw the hotel receipts, nestled in our joint bank account like venomous snakes in a Garden of Eden. They were for boutique hotels in nearby towns, places we'd never been together. The rooms were purchased with Linda's credit card, a detail so audacious, so brazenly arrogant, it stole the breath from my lungs. But it was the selfie that finally shattered the last vestiges of my denial, the final, brutal blow that brought my world crashing down. It was a picture of my mother, taken in my own bedroom, on my side of the bed. Our framed wedding portrait was visible on the nightstand behind her, a cruel, mocking detail. She was wearing one of my silk robes. She was smiling, a coy, triumphant look in her eyes, the kind of look that said, "I've won." The caption beneath it was a dagger to my heart, twisting in the wound of my discovery. "Yours for tonight." The world seemed to tilt and spin, the carefully constructed walls of my reality crumbling into dust. I sank to the floor, the iPad slipping from my numb fingers and clattering onto the hardwood. The silence of the house rushed in, amplifying the sound of my own ragged, hysterical breaths. The two people I trusted most in the world, the two pillars of my existence, had not only betrayed me in the most intimate way imaginable, but they had reveled in it. They had built a secret world on the ruins of my trust, laughing at my pain behind my back. The confrontation was a maelstrom of tears and accusations, a scene ripped from the pages of the trashiest novel imaginable. But this was my life, a waking nightmare playing out in the sterile perfection of my suburban home. Linda, my mother, the woman who was supposed to protect me, to love me unconditionally, stood before me, her face an unreadable mask of feigned innocence. I held up the iPad, my hand shaking so violently I could barely keep it steady. And then the mask slipped. It was replaced by a cold, cruel fury, an expression so devoid of maternal love it was unrecognizable. She didn't deny it. Instead, she twisted my words, my pain, my heartbreak, turning it all back on me. I was too busy with my career, too cold and unresponsive in bed, too wrapped up in my own little world to notice my husband's needs. It was a masterclass in gaslighting, a vicious psychological assault designed to make me question my own sanity, to make me believe that I was the architect of my own destruction. Michael stood beside her, silent and ashen-faced, a coward hiding behind the woman who had become his accomplice. "You always hear what you want to hear, Jessica," she'd once told me dismissively when I was a teenager, and had caught her in a lie about money she'd borrowed from my savings. Now, as an adult, the same insidious tactic was being used to dismantle my reality, to convince me that the clear, undeniable evidence of my senses was a fiction of my own making. Parents with narcissistic tendencies, I would later learn through hours of late-night, desperate research, often resort to such profound manipulation. It's how they maintain control, how they evade responsibility, how they ensure their own fragile egos remain intact, no matter the cost to those around them. The shock gave way to something else, something harder and hotter. A searing, righteous anger began to bubble up from the depths of my shattered heart, a molten core of fury that burned away the tears and the heartbreak. They thought I would crumble. They thought I would stay quiet, that I would swallow my pain and play the part of the dutiful daughter, the forgiving wife, just to maintain the facade of our perfect family. They thought I would never fight back. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I knew I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof, not just for myself, but for the world. I needed to expose them, to strip away the layers of lies and carefully constructed deceit, until only the ugly, unvarnished truth remained for everyone to see. The next day, my eyes swollen and my heart a block of ice, I went online and purchased a small, discreet home security camera for $250. It was advertised for keeping an eye on pets or packages, but I had a different kind of pest in mind. It had high-definition video and, most importantly, nighttime motion detection. I installed it in the kitchen, hidden on top of the refrigerator, its tiny lens a silent, unblinking witness aimed at the heart of our home. It was a Trojan horse in my own house. 2 weeks, 14 days. It was an eternity. I lived a double life, a hollowed-out version of myself going through the motions. I smiled. I made small talk. I finalized the details for the party. I played the part of the happy wife and devoted daughter while a storm of rage and betrayal raged within me. The RSVPs continued to roll in, each cheerful confirmation a fresh twist of the knife. I reconfirmed every attendance personally, my voice a model of cheerful efficiency, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. I was laying a trap, a carefully orchestrated performance of my own, and the stage was almost set. Every detail of the party, once a symbol of my hope, was now a weapon in my arsenal. I found a perverse pleasure in the planning, in the knowledge that every perfectly folded napkin, every carefully arranged centerpiece, was a step closer to their public humiliation. The night before the party, it happened. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A motion alert from the security camera app, my breath caught in my throat. I opened the app, my thumb hovering over the live feed button. I watched, my heart pounding against my ribs as the grainy, black-and-white footage played out on the screen. There they were, my mother and my husband. They were in my kitchen, thinking they were safe in the darkness. He had his arms wrapped around her from behind, his head buried in her neck. She tilted her head back, laughing, a silent, ghostly laugh on the screen. They moved together, a grotesque parody of love and affection, their silhouettes a damning indictment against the sterile backdrop of my stainless steel appliances. The timestamp in the corner of the screen was a final, irrefutable nail in their coffin. The next morning, I felt a strange and chilling calm. The grief was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a powerful sense of purpose. I took the video file on a USB stick to a local video production house, a place that usually made wedding videos and corporate training films. I paid the editor $300 in cash to clean up the audio and add clear, bold titles. Linda Lane and Michael Lane, the night before their third wedding anniversary. I told him it was for a performance art piece. The $5,000 I had so carefully saved for the party, the celebration that was meant to be a testament to our love, would now be the cost of my liberation. It was the best money I had ever spent. The evening of the party arrived, a perfect, balmy summer night. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, grilled hors d'oeuvres, and the low, happy hum of polite conversation. Our backyard was transformed, a sea of twinkling fairy lights and elegantly dressed guests. Dozens of friends, relatives, and neighbors had gathered to celebrate our love, their faces a gallery of smiling, unsuspecting masks. I saw my mother's friends from the PTA, the women who had always told me how lucky I was to have such a devoted mother. I saw Michael's colleagues from work, the ones who had clapped him on the back at our wedding and told him he was a lucky man. I saw my own friends, the ones who had listened to my worries about my marriage and told me everything would be all right. They were all here, all unwitting actors in the final act of my tragedy. My mother was in her element, the undisputed queen of the evening. She held court near the bubbling champagne fountain, her place of honor, beaming like a monarch presiding over her loyal subjects. She was the picture of maternal pride, her arm linked possessively through Michael's, a gesture that made my stomach churn with a mixture of nausea and rage. Michael, for his part, looked like a man on his way to the gallows. He was tense, his smile strained at the edges, his eyes darting nervously around the crowd as if searching for an escape route. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know how wrong it was about to get. I moved through the throng of well-wishers, a ghost at my own feast. My heart was a steady, cold drumbeat in my chest. I accepted congratulations, I smiled for photos, my voice a stranger to my own ears. The shock had given way to a chilling, almost euphoric sense of calm. The righteous anger had solidified into a steely, unbreakable resolve. I was no longer a victim cowering in the shadows. I was an avenging angel, and the hour of reckoning was at hand. As the sun began to set, casting long, dramatic shadows across the manicured lawn, I stepped onto the small, makeshift stage we had rented for the band. I picked up the microphone. I tapped the glass of my champagne flute, the sharp, clear sound cutting through the chatter like a gunshot, drawing all eyes to me. "Thank you all so much for coming," I began, my voice clear and steady, betraying none of the seismic turmoil that raged within me. "It means the world to Michael and me to have you all here, our dearest friends and family, to celebrate our third anniversary." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the sea of expectant faces, landing for a long, deliberate moment on my mother. Her smile was a beacon of self-congratulatory pride. She thought this was all for her. "So much of our happiness is thanks to the love and support that surrounds us, especially from my mother, who has been a rock for both of us." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "To honor that, I've put together a little tribute," I continued, "a look back at the love and support that has brought us to this very special moment." I turned and gave a sharp, definitive nod to the technician I had hired. The large projector screen behind me, which everyone assumed was for a slideshow of romantic memories, flickered to life. But it was not a montage of smiling wedding photos or sun-drenched vacation snapshots that filled the screen. It was the grainy, black-and-white footage from my kitchen security camera, blown up to 10 feet high, crystal clear and time-stamped for all to see. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, a sound like the wind being sucked out of the world. The silence that followed was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket of disbelief. And then, the chaos erupted. The air filled with horrified whispers, then shouts. Phones were out, their screens held aloft like tiny digital torches, their cameras recording the spectacular, real-time train wreck of my life. Someone was live streaming, their breathless, shocked commentary, a running narration of the Golden Mom's epic fall from grace. The video played on a loop, my mother and my husband caught in their sordid embrace, their betrayal broadcast for the entire community to witness. Linda's face was a mask of pure horror, the blood draining from it as her carefully constructed world collapsed around her in a hail of digital shrapnel and public scorn. Michael, his face ashen, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief, looked as if he wanted the ground to open up and swallow him whole. He opened his mouth to speak, to offer some pathetic, fumbling explanation, but his words were drowned out by the rising tide of outrage and disgust from the people who had once been his friends. In that moment, watching the architects of my pain be consumed by the consequences of their actions, I felt a strange and powerful sense of release. I had not just exposed them, I had freed myself. The crushing weight of their betrayal, the years of subtle manipulation and emotional abuse, lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a fierce, exhilarating sense of empowerment. The following week, I walked into a lawyer's office and filed for divorce, citing adultery as the grounds. In New Jersey, while it is a no-fault state, adultery can still be a significant factor in the proceedings, particularly when it comes to the equitable division of assets, especially if marital funds were used to facilitate the affair. The hotel receipts, paid for with Linda's credit card but drawn from our joint account, were Exhibit A. I blocked both of them from my accounts, from my phone, from my life. I severed the toxic ties that had bound me to their deceit for so long. The $5,000 party had been a steep price to pay, but it was the cost of my liberation, a down payment on a future free from their lies. The fallout in our small town was swift and brutal. Linda and Michael became pariahs in their own backyard. Their names were whispered in hushed, scandalized tones at the grocery store, at the school drop-off, at the very church where my mother had once been a revered figurehead. Her reputation, so meticulously cultivated over decades of selfless service and performative piety, was shattered beyond repair, leaving behind a permanent legacy of shame and hypocrisy. And me, I became something of a local legend, the woman who had been cheated on by her husband and her own mother. But more than that, I was the woman who had dared to fight back, who had refused to be silenced, who had served justice on a projector screen for all to see. The neighbors who had once looked at me with a mixture of pity and condescension now saw me with a newfound respect, an admiration for my strength. I no longer walked with my head down, my shoulders slumped under the weight of a secret I was forced to carry. I walked with my head held high, my gaze steady and clear, my future a blank page that was finally my own to write. I started going to therapy, learning to unpack the years of emotional manipulation I had endured. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had been pushed to the periphery by my all-consuming family obligations. I started to rediscover the woman who had been buried beneath the title of good daughter. Turns out, justice gets a whole lot sweeter with a few thousand views. And that's the story of the golden lie. What did you think? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. We'll see you in the next one.